Hey, good people, this is your NI Down back with another YouTube reflection. And this is a personal journal for contemplative people looking to think, grow, and have impact in the world. So, hey, I'm here to do a response to a YouTube comment. It's a young lady who's identifying as an ISFP, and apparently she was typed as an ESFP, and that is causing some consternation. She provided a lengthy post. There were some things I wanted to say to her. I just didn't have the energy to expound on what I wanted to say via text because I spent so much time working and texting, typing. And so I am deciding to expound on it via audio reflection and then sharing it with other people if it is of value. There are four things that I'd like to say. I haven't given her a response yet. But as of now, there are four things I want to say, and I just want to give those to you right quick, and then we'll see where this reflection takes me. I want to talk to her about there being no direct line between attitude and actions. I'll explain that in a second. There is no self without context. There's a little side note I want to talk to her about relating to cognitive functions more than traits. Seeing what happens when she explores herself through the lens of cognitive functions and not through the lens of traits. And then the fourth and final thing would be identity and the empowerment associated with identity work. So those are four things that came to me as I was reading her response, four things I want to expound upon, and I'm going to do that out loud just in case it benefits someone else to hear this, okay? But if you're new to me, I am a podcaster, which you're listening to. 2 years ago, I started a second podcast as a personal journal during the pandemic. And I have grown to really appreciate the level of authenticity that comes to this project, which is different from my primary project, which doesn't mean I'm inauthentic, but that's more work related. This project is unedited, is unscripted, but the most important thing is that I'm an INTJ 8 and I give myself permission to move about in a reflective fashion and not in a linear, direct, information given fashion, which is different from the way most INTJs show up on YouTube. If you want to know more about me or my project, feel free to go to my website at yournidom.wordpress.com. All right. So I don't want to give the name of the young lady just because I don't feel like that's appropriate. But I will say she was posting in a Facebook page something about, I think it's MBTI Coffee House or something like that. MBTI Coffee House. So the first thing I want to say is I did a reflection right before Christmas on my podcast number 2. Your NI Down, by the way, is the name of the podcast. And I was thinking a lot about myself as an INTJ and the way I show up in different environments. And so there's more I'm going to say about the different environments when I talk about context. But a month ago, I was just thinking about my behavior at work. And I was just looking at some other INTJs at work and and their behavior and their affect. So I did a reflection called Behaviorism. Go check out that episode. And in that episode, I was pulling from some text from one of my books on social psychology, where there's some research that says there's not a direct line between attitudes and action. And action would be behavior, and attitude would be intention. So we have attitudes towards objects. An attitude can be an orientation towards an object, a value towards an object, a preference towards an object. But we may not always act accordingly to that attitude. As a result, there isn't a direct line between attitude and behavior. I don't want to unpack that. You have to go to that episode to go listen to more. I just want to warn you, that's not an information-driven episode. That was me trying to figure some things out. So you will learn in that episode, but you're going to have to be with me in the journey because I was dealing with my own existential crisis, if you will. But I want to bring this up for this young lady because it is possible that she is actually an ISFJ, and it is possible that she could be showing up in a way that looks like an ESFJ because her behavior doesn't have to match her orientation. Her behavior does not have to match her four-letter code. Now, we tend to have a preference, and in that preference, there is a pattern of how we engage that preference, how we engage those four letters. But it is not absolute. There is no absolute correlation between attitude and action. So I wanted to say that. The second thing I wanted to say, that there is no self without context. And in podcast number 2, I did 14 episodes over the past 2 years. 14 episodes about the self, SELF. Something I've been really fascinated by. Self-awareness, self-healing, self-identity. 14 episodes where the word self is in the title, not the description. And 9 of those episodes, I'm talking about this thing called the self. Almost 2 decades ago, I went through this period where I was like, what does it mean to be me? Like, what is the self? Is the self the body? Is the self the mind? I literally was struggling with that. And then I had my grandfather had a stroke. My stepmother had a stroke. So it impacted their cognition, and it impacted their personality. So that really, I struggled with that. Like, where does the self reside? So it's just something I've been interested in for a while. And in podcast number 2, I've tried to tackle it. Well, there are 3 episodes that I wanted to encourage this young lady to go check out. Again, they're all reflections. They're all me dealing with my own existential needs. And so there's no direct information provided, but there is learning there. And so one I want to recommend is I did an episode called The Theory of Self on May 15th, 2021. I did another one called The Core Self, and that was May 29th, 2021. And then I did one called The Self as Form, and that was February 14th, 2021. And all of those I'm really trying to wrestle with. Is there one self or are there multiple selves? Does the self change when we move about from environment to environment? Is the self stable? Is it constant? And is it organized? And so I recently listened to an INTJ, just talked about INTJs will adapt to their environment to be effective in that environment. And he's becoming like one of my favorite INTJs. But my favorite INTJ, which I call him the INTJ academic, I listened to a YouTube on him about maybe 3 months ago, and he talked about quadrants and that we all have these values. We were kind of like born with these values, and these values are they show up as cognitive functions. So my sister's an ISFP and I am an INTJ. We share the same cognitive functions. I'm making this connection with this young lady on Facebook as I'm thinking about my sister. We share the same cognitive functions. They're just scrambled in different orders. That means we have the same values, but what we value, our value stack differs, but the same cognitive functions. So you can be in different environments and those preferences for those values are going to show up differently. And that is how you can look like an ESFJ, even though you're an ISFJ. The third thing I want to just tell you to do is take a moment to self-assess, to self-examine, to critique yourself. If you are looking at yourself through the lens of 4 traits, that's a limited, a restricted use of the Myers-Briggs. Take a look at those cognitive functions. If you take a look at those cognitive functions, you are going to realize that ISFP means, oh man, wait a minute, means your FI first, SE second. If you're an ESFP, that means your SE first, FI second. If you're trying to figure out if you're introverted or extroverted, that's not enough. Because with the way Myers-Briggs works and those cognitive functions, we're both. In the top of the stack, we are both introverted and extroverted. Our dominant function is one orientation. Our second function is the opposite orientation. So in the top of your cognitive stack, you're both an introvert and an extrovert. And how you move into that introversion and extroversion, again, is going to relate to your context and is also going to relate to that trait that is connected. So read about introverted feeling and read about extroverted sensing, and that'll tell you what you're doing most of the time as a dominant function. I'm about to run out of time, so I got to give you this last point. Number 4. This is where I want to end. I did an episode called Identity because there's so many people who say you should not identify with your Myers-Briggs, and I actually do agree with it. But my point is, it doesn't matter what any test says and what any type experts say. What matters most is how you identify. You retain the power to self-identify however the hell you want to identify. That is your right. That is your power. And if the way you identify allows you to move about in the world successfully, minimizing harm, increasing productivity, then damn it, that is the type that works for you. I want to leave you with that. I tell people, if you want to call yourself a clown and clown helps you to be productive and it helps you to minimize harm, then damn it, you're a clown, right? People can label you, but only you can identify yourself. So I want to hold on to that. If you feel that ISFP works for you, then that's what you are. You guys, it is, if this reflection has had any value for you, please give it a heart. If this conversation around identity and the self within context, looking at those cognitive functions, and even this idea about the relationship between attitudes and actions, if any of this relates to a conversation you've had in this world, please take this link and share with those participants. I like to build my community with people who are interested in the things I'm interested in. So please share this link with those participants. If my moving about has caused some randomness, I'd love to hear it. You can find me on my website at yournidom.wordpress.com. Of course, I'm here on YouTube and Facebook as YourNIDom. And you're going to see me on that. I'm going to comment on that young lady's comment under the name of Eve, just so you'll know. And then, and you can find me on my website at yournidom.wordpress.com or Twitter, yournidom1. All right, you guys, it's been a pleasure hanging out with you. Until I come back, be well. Bye.